And again, it kind of goes back to that personal touch and feel, if you will. But they love to be entertained. They like being amused. And unless you're the biggest stick in the mud, when you get something like a bank bag in the mail, you got to have a little grin on your face. And if you don't, and you're that big of a stick in the mud, I don't want you as a customer anyway. So, you can almost weed out the bad folks when you do this kind of stuff too. So it's entertaining. 3D mail is entertaining, and it cuts through the clutter. And I've got a statistic there. But people often spend less than 4 seconds with information they've requested. So right there, that's 5.5 seconds on my timer. So you can go and request information, and they can request your information, or you can go and request someone else's information. And even when they get it in the mail and they know they've requested and they've been waiting for this thing, they will still usually spend less than 4 seconds with it. So that's what we're up against. We've got to be entertaining. We've got to cut the clutter. We've got to find ways to make our marketing stand out. So any message that isn't opened can't be acted upon. So we kind of touched on that a little bit, but I've yet to have anybody tell me that, Travis, I sent a direct mail piece, it was in an envelope, and I sent out 100 pieces, and 50 of them called me, and all of them said they called me without even opening my letter and looking at it. That hasn't happened even once. I've never even had that happen one time where someone said, I sent out an envelope and they didn't open it and they called me up and ordered. So any message that isn't open and read cannot be acted upon. So we really have to make sure that our message is read. And the best way that I know how to do that is to use 3D mail. 3D mail also gets them involved. So if you think about it, the longer you keep them involved in your message, the more you can sell. And if you ask any good salesman, if you ask any good salesman, you say, hey, would you rather have 3 minutes or 30 minutes to make a sale? They're all going to tell you 30 minutes. And so the longer you can keep them involved in your message, the more it can, what I call the sit-around effect even, if you will. So you send something in a trash can. They open it up. They read it. They've not instantly moved to do anything, but then they put that trash can with the letter back on their desk, and maybe they come back to it a few hours later. Maybe they come back to it a day or two later. But it keeps them involved and it sticks around longer. And busy fingers increase response. So as soon as you start getting them to touch things and feel things and open things up, so imagine the bank bag, if you will. They've got to open the zipper. They've got to take out the letter. They've got to unfold it. They've got to read it. Of course, they're going to look at the bank bag. So picture, if you in your mind, if you will, get one of those things. You're going to pick it up and maybe flip it around a couple times and open the zipper. So busy fingers increase response. So it's very, very important to keep them involved and stick, and quite frankly, to stick around and keep them involved. And the number one hurdle it overcomes, and the number one hurdle we face direct mail, is getting opened and gaining attention. And I hit on that on the last one, but I want to reemphasize it here. You cannot make a sale via direct mail if they don't open and look at your message. And so what we're talking about here is ways that virtually guarantee that your message is going to get opened and read. So with all that said, the biggest thing to remember of why 3D mail works is really honestly, who cares? So I just spent 10 minutes on telling you the virtues of why 3D mail works. But a true direct marketing student is going to say, you know what, I don't care why all that works. I just want to know that it does work. And everything we've talked about so far has been tested time and time again by direct mail professionals. So people like Glazier Kennedy, people like myself, we have tested this stuff up and down, and we find that this stuff just works. So you'd be smart to at least give it a test. Anything to add there, Keith? I've been going on for a couple minutes now.
Yeah, I just go back to that slide if you would, Travis. That who cares is often new people to marketing get caught up in the why it works and get so caught up in that if the why doesn't make sense to them, they just can't see through it, and they may not do it. If it makes perfect sense to them, they'll continue to do it, but it really doesn't matter one way or the other. What matters is you continue to do it if you get results. And all of that stuff that you talked about, like the 10 minutes you spent talking about why 3D mail works. Well, that's why we we think it's worked. That's why when you talk to people and why did it stay around, what happened, I mean, just the evidence that we get, well, you know, I actually got this from a neighbor of mine that got it in the mail from you, so that's why I'm calling you. You know, we know all of that stuff, but the real thing that is critically important is to start measuring and knowing your results, and then that's what's huge, is knowing your results and knowing that it works, and then just keep doing it.
You bet. Very cool. Again, I touched on this at the beginning, but in B2B and consumer marketing, I want to touch on this real briefly, and then we'll get to some examples of this, but it works great for both. It just works great for both. People are people, and buyers are buyers. So people buy from other people, not businesses. And that's a big thing to remember. And I'm going to repeat it. People buy from other people and not businesses. And they decide to buy on emotion and then back it up with logic in that order. And that happens whether they're at the kitchen table or the conference table. And whether you're, again, at the kitchen table or the conference table, everybody likes to be entertained. And then, of course, this is a big one I get in B2B. Well, I've got to get through a gatekeeper, and I got to get through a committee at the office. Well, quite frankly, there's a gatekeeper at my house, and Keith, I know there's a gatekeeper at your house because she's my mom, and I know there's a committee.
I pretty much don't know where the mailbox key is. So.
Yeah. So there's a gatekeeper at both places, and quite frankly, if it's an investment of any kind, there's a committee of at least 2 at home, and that may be the case at the office as well. So, you know, and again, we're going to show 2 examples of the exact same mailer people have done here in just a minute or two. So, and again, I want to bring up the elephant in the room is that 3D mail can cost more, and it can, but not always. However, all we're really concerned about is the return on our investment. That's the number one thing we're most concerned about. And so this is what Keith touched on earlier about segmenting your list. My suggestion is to start with smaller, laser-targeted lists and send them multiple mailings. So instead of sending out 5,000 pieces one time, maybe send out 500 pieces 5 times to a really targeted list. And again, I've got some great examples of this, and you'll get much better results versus what I call shotgun marketing.
Yeah, one of the things I want to mention there, too, on the cost. Like you said, it can cost more. When you compare 3D mailing, many times compare that to a fancy brochure, a slick printed piece or whatever. The 3D mail doesn't even actually cost more in many cases. So, and again, the important thing is your cost versus your results. What's your ROI? So I'll let you go ahead, Trev.
Very good. So again, as your profits grow, you can move to larger mailings until you're at capacity, and then mail to maintain capacity. That's a great way to do it. The first example I have is a great example of that. And then many of our clients see our ROI double or even triple. And then so only send to a segment of your list. And again, I'm not going to drone on about that here. We're going to show you examples of that. And so the biggest thing you have to do, quite frankly, is you have to test it. Just test it. And so our number one goal is to cut through the clutter and get attention. So we're gonna show some examples here. The first one I have is from a small town chiropractor who explodes his ROI with a 20-to-1 ROI. So this is Dr. Greg Nielsen, and this is the example I have of from that last slide of starting small and then reinvesting from there. So what Doc Nielsen does, and he just told me this the other day, this is how we test everything. Whatever he's going to send, he says, I'm going to send 100 of these things. And I'm going to send 100, and if I get a response that I like, then I'll reinvest that to send it out to more people. So he only ever has a few $100 out invested, if you will. He may only have $75 for this thing or $120 for this thing. So he only ever has that much money, quote unquote, in the game, because what he does is he tests it and then finds out if it works, and then uses that money to reinvest in it. So he's used this message in a bottle here. And so again, this is he sends this to a lead-generated list. Now, I get a lot of questions about this, and that is this, and I'm going to pick my highlighter here. That is this mailing label right here as I circle it here. I get a lot of questions about that. There's nothing magical to it. That's just a regular old 2-inch by 4-inch mailing label. You can get them at any office supply store. So you can see there he's got his up at the top. So again, I'll grab my pen here, just one sec. So he's got up here, you can see he's got his name and address and his return address and full contact information. Then you can see down here, he has the address label. So we have right on the outside of this message in a bottle. This thing just drops right into the mail, and it goes right out just like that. So again, on the next slide here, you'll see that now this is the message in a bottle actually opens from the bottom. So what we suggest you do is you take your Avery label or your mailing label there. I use an Avery brand, and you either write on there or you print on there. I use Microsoft Word, and I just print right on there, twist to open with a little arrow. And because this is going to open, again, I'll grab my little spotlight here. This is going to open right down here. So you've got your mailing address. You can see the recipient's address here. And then one thing I want to point out up here is the doc uses live stamps. You can use live stamps. You can use a Pitney Bowes machine. You can use stamps.com. We find that the live stamps tend to work as good as anything, and they just, it again adds more of that personal touch, if you will. So this is what he used. This was, I should back up a little bit. He sent this to a lead-generated list. So he's doing marketing out there where people raise their hand, and at some point they have said, yes, I'm interested in the services you provide. So instead of mailing out maybe 5,000 of these to his entire town, which 5,000 might be an exaggeration because he's in Waterford, Wisconsin. I have no idea how many people are there. Maybe if the docs on the call will tell me. But so instead of mailing shotgun to 5,000 people, he has his list of lead-generated people who he sends this to. And so again, we'll move to the next one. And that's the picture of everything that was inside the envelope, or not the envelope, everything that was inside the message in a bottle. So as you can see here, there's a picture up there. And again, let me grab my little spotlight. There's a picture here. That's Miss Steffi. That's his office manager. And the doc has done a real good job of creating what we call personality in his business. So when you get a piece of mailing from the doc, it actually doesn't, I shouldn't say it never comes from Doc Nielsen, but the vast majority of the time it comes from Miss Steffi. And Miss Steffi kind of has this alter ego, if you will, in the office. So she's the crazy one that thinks up all this marketing stuff and does it for the doc, and sometimes does it behind his back, and he doesn't know really what's going on, which I got to tell you is as far from the truth as could possibly be. Doc knows his marketing inside and out. But he's created this character of Miss Steffi, and so everything comes from Miss Steffi. And you'll also notice here, so he's got the one-page letter here. I know it's hard to see, but he actually did this on lined white paper. So not yellow legal pad, but like white college rule paper like you'd get out of a notebook or a notepad. So that's what he used there. Some fun graphics there. He had some fun on it. You can kind of see it there. Ahoy matey, who else deserves the royal chiropractic treatment? And then again, if you look over here on the left, he's got these prescription slips that also go inside. And we know from testing that the more of these kind of slips you can put inside, in the marketing world they're called buck slips or inserts, the more of those you can put in, the better chance you have to kind of get their attention. So you can see here he actually, if I'm not mistaken, he actually burned the edges of these. So you can see the edges are burned. And one other thing he did that's very, very smart here. One of these prescription pads is for a $10 office visit for the recipient. The other one is for the recipient to give to a friend, family member, or neighbor that gets them a $25 new patient visit. So even though he's soliciting this letter for that recipient, he's also thinking about how can I get a referral. And so what he does with that is he includes this referral prescription slip, which is very, very smart. Anything to that, Keith?
No, you not a lot. You hit on most everything there, but Doc knows his stuff, and if you didn't point out this is a great idea here of actually putting in the referral request also, which is it's so non-threatening in the way that he's doing it that it's just fabulous. And Doc knows his stuff. He measures his stuff, and he comes back and uses this quite often. And again, not doing this to everybody, but doing it to a lead-generated list that he knows is somewhat interested in him already.
You bet. The next slide I have here is just a little bit of the numbers that the doc gave me. They consistently get between a 25 and a 32.8. We talk about knowing your numbers. A 32.8 response rate sending out. He does about 200 to 300 per month. So on his list, he has a few hundred. He has more than a few hundred. So but he only sends out to a few hundred of those people each month. And so that's the important part. He only has a few $100s of, in the game, if you will. But when you're getting a 25% response rate, that's a lot of money coming back. And in fact, he did the math for me. He said he makes $2,055 for every $100 he invested in this promotion. And in typical Wisconsin fashion, that buys some serious grilled cheese sandwiches for the family. Because, guys in Wisconsin, all they do is talk about cheese. So that's actually his testimonial that he emailed me about a year ago when he was obviously ecstatic with those results. So
yeah, and one of the things I want to point out there too is that Doc, it's not all 3D mail. Doc does what I mentioned real early on here. He does everything. He does postcards. He does other direct mail, almost all direct mail. But it's not just 3D mail every time. But he comes back with 3D mail quite often, and he's one of our very best clients. He's coming back to us a lot too, so that's good.
So we're going to talk about a lost client campaign. Now, this is one of those ones now where I have a B2B and a B2C example. But first, just real quickly, we'll talk about lost clients. This is a lost client campaign. This is a person or a business who has previously bought from you, but now hasn't bought from you in a predetermined amount of time. And to be honest with you, that time is different from business to business. So let's say you're a breakfast diner, and you serve breakfast every morning, and you got your group of regular clients that come in at least once a week. So after 1 week, if they don't come in, I'd be worried about them, and I'd be thinking, if John comes in every Tuesday and sits his rear end down at the stool at the diner, and this Tuesday he didn't, where's John? So that would be my question. So that's a breakfast diner. In a menswear retail store, it might be 4 to 6 months. So every season they should maybe get something new every 4 to 6 months. That number comes actually straight from Bill Glazier, who many of you know owned a retail menswear store before he got into the info marketing and the Glazier Kennedy world. So his feeling was every 4 to 6 months, the turn of every season, they should at least be coming back and getting me something. For a dentist, obviously, out there, it's 6 to 12 months. For a car salesman, it may be 3 to 5 years. So what's the right time? To be honest with you, only you can answer that for your business. There are obviously some guidelines that we can use, and we can go over those with some questions. But really, the best time is you've got to kind of look at your order history, look at your customers, and say, when's the logical time they should come back? So this first one comes from Mark Daniels. Mark has an auto repair shop, Dan's Auto Service, in Taberg, New York, and he got an 18% response rate over 3 steps. I'm only going to show you the first step. That's all we have time for. But just know that a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about transferred to the other steps as well. So again, he sends out our boomerang. I've got a picture of that coming up. So here's a picture of the envelope he used. This is a mock-up of his envelope. I didn't have his exact envelope that he sent out. Somehow that got separated from the rest of the letter. But you'll notice a couple things here. This boomerang is actually slightly larger than a regular number 10 envelope. So we use what's called a number 12 envelope. And let me grab my spotlight here. So this is a number 12 envelope. It's about a ½ inch bigger all the way around than a standard number 10. The great thing about it is it's still what the post office calls a normal